Okay. Mr. Barrick, it is yours to call the order if you're ready.
Yes, sir. Here's committee meeting.
Yep. Hit that thing there. There you go.
The Engineers Committee meeting will come to order.
All right. Thank you, sir. For the roll, we've got Jason Carter.
Present.
Rob Barrick.
Here.
Alton Heathcote.
I'm happily here with my biscuit in mouth.
Good. All right. Mr. Collins.
Here.
Dr. Ash.
Here.
And Eddie Jett.
Here.
All right. Thank you. Chair, we have roll. If you're ready, I believe we're able to dive in.
Okay. So,
All right. It looks like the first item we have on our agenda is the appellations. You're like, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, we're doing this again. I thought we already had that conversation. Well, we did, but then we had a little bit of a development, a sidebar conversation. Mr. Carter and I were talking about appellations in particular, and trying to figure out if there's any solutions available to us. We decided at the last, if you recall, that we were just going to monitor that, see what the industry does with that, and then if a path opens up, then we could go that route. But then just for discussion, let me get there myself. There it is.
then didn't we decide that it was going to require a change in the statute, which is out of our hands?
Well, there was some. I think what we were looking for was just some path forward as far as we talked about perhaps professional engineer, or could we further define what a use of that appellation would what would be determined as out of bounds. But at the end of it, there wasn't really a clear path, or there wasn't a consensus that really evolved from the committee. So then we decided to sort of put a pin in that one until we could investigate that one a little further. And then Mr. Carter and I were discussing this, and one thing that I had not noticed at the time, but looks like the architects have a, if you look at 0120 rule 01-03 1F, it states this: any person gaining practical experience in an office of practicing architect may use the title, appellation, or designation architectural associate. So one option is just to keep it consistent, is just to apply that across the board with all of our design professions. Since we've already got the architects doing that, we can all just stay in step. And then we could, on down the road, decide if we want to formalize that in our rules later in another package using professional engineer or some other variation, whatever the board decides. But that was the genesis of the discussion. Mr. Carter, do you have anything you want to add to that, or?
No, I think that sums it up pretty well. So that would just be a rulemaking.
Well, not necessarily. We don't have to decide right at this point, because if they're not drafting or engaged in the practice of engineering, and they're working under a licensed individual, then they're already covered. So we just need probably clarification, the consensus, something from the board to state that's what we want to do going forward. That's one way to handle that. And then Mr. Jett, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think it's wise to monitor the industry. We're from a personal note, our company's looking at different titles and discovered that although you can use the appellation associate architect in Tennessee, our research indicated, and it's speculative, that there's close to 40 states, and we're licensed in multiple states, where that's a violation. Mm-hmm. So Tennessee's one of the few that you can actually call an associate architect. Yeah. So I would just advise to watch the industry and see what our partners do.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate the backing that up, and that was the consensus, and I think I'm glad that you reiterated that, because this doesn't really change our path or the consensus that we described or discussed earlier, but it's just sort of a mediating position on some level so we can give some instruction to those folks that are working in Tennessee until we iron that out. Since we've already got something on the books for the architects, it's kind of what we have in mind. Now, of course, another rules package down the road, a couple of years from now, that may change, to Mr. Jett's point. As we continue to go through these NCWS meetings, I think we're going to get a better feel about, where all this is going.
Yeah, Glenn, I was at the NCWS committee meeting a couple weeks ago, and in the procedures and policies there, they're going through a pretty extensive effort to change everything in there to say professional engineer and professional surveyor. And they're making a real point of making those changes to the NCWS.
Yeah.
Do they have
Policies and
language proposed for that?
They're-
Like statutory language?
Yeah, it'll be at the next annual meeting, it will be presented for a vote. Yeah.
I think that there are really two separate issues here. One of them is, what title do you give somebody working in your own firm that's not yet registered? The other one is, what are you advertising? You're not in a firm. You're not working under a professional engineer. Are you claiming that you are an engineer? And I think that's what brought this up to begin with. But those two things, and to expect someone who's advertising on a website to state that he's an associate engineer, well, to whom? Probably no one. So I think what James is talking about probably is the way we will eventually go, and if we can ever get some consensus about it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's difficult, and I think that's why NCAA, and that makes a lot of sense, because professional indicates licensure. We're a professional licensure board, so we have programs that issue professional licensing. So that makes a lot of sense, and I suspect that's where this is going. But until that's the ruling or the conclusion, we just need some sort of mediating place, some instruction, because the folks you're talking about, are folks that are probably not going to be as sensitive to whatever we decide. But it's those folks that are wanting to do the right thing, don't know what to do. They're getting a lot of conflicting information. That's really what this discussion is mostly about.
Would there also be a differentiation between people who enjoy the industrial exemption, being engineers, and everybody else that's practicing in the public, being professional engineers?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All the exemptions still exist. There's no.
But would they call themselves professional engineers as well?
At that point, they wouldn't be able to, if that's where we go.
Exactly. That's my
Right,
point.
correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
If we go in that direction, then they would not be able to use that title, professional engineer. It'd be for licensees.
Okay.
I think if we're going to expect to stamp out the use of the title engineer, we're sweeping the beach. Because garbage men are sanitation engineers. I mean, it goes on and on.
Yeah. Well, and the good thing too is part of the reason why this has been a problem, because there hasn't been an industry consensus. And so this is new. And as this develops and continues, if NCWS goes that route and they go professional engineer, then it's going to be very clear to everybody what that means. And then that'll be the part of the common nomenclature. So this will be a non-issue then. But right now we're waiting on that, right? So we have to do something until then. We're sort of patching it together until we get something better. Yes, Dr. Ash?
I think it will be a matter of time, because the committee already made that recommendation in the last
Direction
meeting.
from the board.
Yeah.
Make that change.
And for right now, engineering graduates
So it's just a matter of.
in Tennessee, what they're gonna call themselves?
Yeah.
We're gonna have to find a term for them to call themselves.
No, I think that's great. So, there's no decision, there's no action that we need to take as far as that goes. The reason why I'm discussing that in the engineering committee is because out of nearly 22 licensees, the engineers hold 17,000 of those. And the architects already have, and then 4,400 of those licensees are the architects, and they've already got architectural associate. So they're not really a part of the equation. So we're looking at, 599 landscape architects and roughly, 300 plus interior designers. So if you're looking at 21,000 of the licensees say, yeah, associate is a sort of intermediate, place that we can land until we get something more final, something more suitable to the industry and to this solution. Then that's really the gist of it.
Don't we already have the terminology engineer intern that we use that's similar to?
That's a license, or not a license, but a registration.
Only if they had passed their FE.
Right,
They
that's
don't call
correct.
themselves that unless
So
they passed
we're
it.
talking about, and those folks are pursuing licensure. That's why they're an intern. So we're talking about folks that aren't necessarily pursuing it, but need some soft landing or need something that they can, some sort of intermediate solution. So I'd just be interested if there's any resistance to that at this point. I don't know that we could do a vote just so we have some indication of if there's a direction that the board wants to go.
If NCAAS is helping craft potential legislation or language that would go into legislation to designate professional from engineer, I'd prefer, I think, to wait for that.
Well, I was going to suggest if that directive, that language is available, that we look at it, agree that it's the right thing to do, and then start the process of getting the whatever legislation needs to do that. And just
That language is already in there in the committee level. We have a copy, I have a copy of that.
okay.
Yeah.
And we're going to bring all that back. Our
Agreement? Bingo.
Jason?
In agreement to, just to clarify what we're agreeing to, in agreement to use,
We're going to wait till the NCAAS finalizes whatever their, I guess, statutorial
Agree that-
language is, review it, and then determine whether or not we need to edit it, but use it in Tennessee.
well, the only concern I would have with, I'm in favor of it. The only concern I would have, I think Glenn kind of pointed to this, that's going to be a long process, right? Because that's a statutory thing. So I think what Glenn's trying to get to is in the short term, over the next whatever, the next however many months it will take to get through the process of putting that in our statutes, this can provide some guidance to the people. Again, my concern is the people that are trying to do the right thing,
Right.
Not the sanitation engineers.
You're talking about.
Guy with the trash
talking
truck.
about the engineering intern within a firm,
Right.
associate engineers.
Right,
yeah.
right. Because right now, they can't, according to our statutes, someone that's, even if they're an EI, they can't call themselves an engineer intern according to our statutes because that'd be a violation.
Well, and if they don't have a
They can
certificate,
use the designation. EI.
I think they can use
If they pass
EI.
their
Not according
If they pass
not according to the statute.
yeah,
And we've been breaking the statute over at SSR for about 30 years.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. And we have too.
Yeah.
Full disclosure.
well, everybody has interns, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So, I mean, if you went to, no, we'll just move the design professionals aside. If every summer, you'll look on DOHR's website and it's just loaded with internships. Everyone's an intern, And so, but in our statute, intern means something. It's a registration, And so it's in preparation for full licensure. So although used informally in some of these firms that you're talking about, if they were to, they can say, well, I'm an engineering student and I'm working as an intern at such and such. But if they say engineering intern underneath our statute, that actually has some implications. And so that's why we're looking for some sort of middle ground here, and as to what Mr. Carter was stating. Yeah, and so just instruction for folks. I think we're headed towards probably the professional engineer. It makes sense anyway, because that's what PE is. It's a professional engineer. And so I think that's where the industry is going, but really just instruction for Stuart, because he has to work this, so we need like a practical landing for him. So as he's instructing folks, if we're giving them letters of instruction or letters of warning, we can say, hey, you could do engineering associate. We can't say, what we don't want to do is say, you can't do any of this. And then they say, well, what can we do? And we just say, well, we're going to wait on NCAAS to tell us, in a couple years. So that's what we're at, and that's kind of what we're trying to solve.
So to clarify, let me read TCA 62-105, right? It says, a person is construed to practice or offer to practice engineering, blah, 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 who by verbal claim, sign, et cetera, represents that person to be an architect, engineer, landscape architect with or without qualifying adjective. So in other words, if you are not licensed and your job title is associate engineer, according to our current statute, you're in violation. And I agree, that means there are companies all over the state that have been violating that statute for years.
That's exactly the title we give them.
Right, I know, same with us. Right.
That's right. So we're trying to help folks out in that situation. And as a result, it's just the current stance we're at isn't working. It's creating some confusion on our complaints. So if we could say, hey, look, like our architects, they're using associate, we suggest you do the same until we get a permanent fix. That's kind of where we're headed with that one.
It seems like even if we did get this worked out, we're inevitably going to get a case where someone is misleading the public and our rules really don't touch it. It seems like there would be a stipulation in there that the board would review, and if they're misleading the public and threatening the health, safety, and welfare, we get the act, and then the rest of it takes care of itself. It's kind of like, MD denotes
Right.
medical doctor, but I'm sure that industry would have trouble if people just called themselves doctors.
Yeah, and I mean, we've got interns that have an engineering degree and work at firms, and they're interns, with an engineering degree. But if they were to, unless they've got the certificate, engineering intern as an appellation on their cards, is a registration. So that's what we're saying. It's just something that some middle ground. But yeah, we're going to keep watching NCAA, and we've got some folks coming in, going in April. I'll be there in April, and I think they'll probably wrap it up in August too. So, I think we're going to get this solved for everybody, and it's just kind of, it's been a mushy middle for a while, and
What's
so.
the appropriate time to submit a change like this?
Oh, this. Are you talking about a change in statute, or now statute would require a sponsor? Like, we don't lobby for bills. The department will send up recommendations, and then those could get adopted by a sponsor, but we can't sponsor the legislation. We would need somebody, and if Casey has those relationships, other associations. If we as a board said, yeah, that's what we want to do, then come legislative session next year. Then some sponsor would pick that up at the behoof of some association, to which an elected official, they have their own shared constituency, and if they're the one voice, they're saying that's what we want, then that'll show up in a bill, and then those go. And I'll tell you, statute goes a lot quicker than rules. You guys are already figuring that out, So that would go pretty quick. That wouldn't be. That's not going to be real difficult.
And that legislative session next year would start what month?
It's January, early January, and they usually, I think, there you go, second Tuesday. So, and they usually closes off the bills into January, beginning of February. So they've got a short period there, about 3 weeks to a month. Yes, ma'am.
Anything that comes from this board needs to go through the governor's process. So that needs to be in.
Yeah, they're not going to. They're not making any recommendations, but yeah. All right.
Let the record show we got a full and lively discussion and have semi-path forward.
Right. All right.
We
So,
have comedy application reviews to discuss here.
well, did you need anything else on the associate, or are you good? You got it. Okay. We're good on the appellations then. That was a good discussion. Thank you very much. We're ready for the comedy applications then.
So we're through?
Yes, sir. I think so. Unless we got any other comments, I think we're ready for the next item.
Anybody else have anything they'd like to discuss?
All right.
I think we're done.
All right. So comedy application then, can we jump in that one, or did you?
Say again?
Are you good? You want to jump in the comedy applications then? Are you all right with that if we do that right now? Yeah, okay. Comedy applications. All right. So this is, you should have, we're going to talk in the full board, but I just wanted to touch on it if we had a little time. Looks like we do. So I'd like to, it'll be brief, but I wanted to sort of have more of a robust conversation, again, because you have the lion's share of the numbers, the license count, but it should be right there. If you'll, You're looking at number 4 on your iPad. And I'm recommending that what is highlighted there, and I sent you an email some time ago, everyone individually an email in regards to this. You probably recall that. And so I was going to give you the consensus on that poll that we did, but the idea was to some variation of this where we delete those highlighted portions. We discussed the possibility of a policy change regarding comedy and model law apps only. As you recall, the certifying bodies themselves, NCAAS, NCARB, CIDQ, CLARB, they already verified the 3-legged stool on those. It's in our statute as well. If we get those, if we get their certificates, an active certificate from them, that's transmitted to us. So there isn't really much left for the board member to do on these apps, which is only resulting in delays and clogging up your inbox. I mean, those where that's not, that hasn't been validated, affirmed, and confirmed on the by those institutions, then those are still going to keep coming to the board. You know, if it's a straight up accredited school, they're clearly within the pathway. CLARB, NCIDQ, all of them have NCAAS or NCAAS. NCARB, if they've already validated that yes, that's an accredited school well within our statute. They've also validated that they've passed all the exams and they've verified all the experience. That's a rubber stamp at that point. You know, there's not much for us to look at. And so on those applications and those alone, I would like to, if the board would grant the administration authority to approve those and get those out the door so they're not sitting in someone's inbox when you could be looking at the other applications. That would just for sake of administrative efficiency and plus to get these folks to work too. So they're not waiting long and they have to. Those are the ones we have in view. And then Alton, did you have something to say?
I just wanted to thank you for adding what you did to clarify the language to make sure it was clearly understood that it was just the blocking and tackling type applications. My concern, I guess, that I shared with Glenn was there's so many different registration laws in other states. Like, for example, there are a number of states that consider an ETAC equal to an EAC accreditation. If you graduated from ETAC University with an engineering technology degree, you can sit for and if you pass the PE exam, you're good. And that's not what our rules require. So what Glenn's done is kind of modify the language to stipulate that it's just for those straightforward, what we see every day kind of applications, not anomalies.
Right. And you'll notice in that policy there, the requirements were not altered. Those remain in the policy. What's highlighted is the process going through a board member, the executive director, making a recommendation, and then basically putting that in your inbox. So with those portions deleted, we're saying at that point, and then if the board grants the administration the authority to do that on those and those alone, ETAC degrees aren't going to come through us. You know, if there's any question about equivalency, you know, then that'll still come back to the board. All of those applications. We're saying only the ones where they're straight down the middle. Those are they meet the 3-legged stool well within our statute, and it's been verified by an independent authority. So you know the certifying body themselves. And on those, we wouldn't send those to the board.
Is this something the engineering committee needs to vote on?
Yes, sir.
Recommendation to the full
Yes, sir.
board?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay.
So moved.
So we got a motion and a
Second.
second.
Mm-hmm.
There's no further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Bingo.
All right. That one's approved then, and then we'll just make that recommendation to the full
We'll call
board.
that the Heidi Amendment.
Yeah. Yeah, and the hires will be pleased too because you know they track those metrics, and so you know they're going to be pleased with that. So thank you for doing that heavy lift for us on that one, and we'll make the adjustments on the policy here. All right. Now, Rob, I'm sorry I've delayed you long enough. So you're ready. If you want to, unless there's something else, you can end this thing. Or...
Is there anything else anybody like to discuss?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
I do. I have
Yes, sir.
one because of the nature of the complaint and because of the recommendation, I'd like the engineering committee's review. We received a complaint that I reviewed that was fairly extraordinary, to the point that I'm recommending temporary suspension of somebody's license. I don't believe me. I've struggled with this. I've reviewed it multiple times. Before I made this recommendation, I reviewed the set of plans, and I had somebody that works with me independently review the set of plans. In both review sets, we had 10 pages of review comments, of problems and issues. Some of them were serious, incorrect grades, no detention, no calculations for retaining walls in positions where people in a curve would run into them, sewer lines put at the wrong grades, and intersections of more than 120 degrees that obviously would not work. And there were so many deficiencies and so many issues with these plans. And as Stuart has shared with me, that there was a similar or a complaint lodged against this individual 2 years ago, where this board issued a letter of caution. But this rises to the level of endangering the public's health and safety, and it demonstrates, I think, extreme incompetence. I've specifically noted some of the sections in the law that I think have been violated, but even to cap it off, this individual, the complaint was filed against, actually took a check from the complainant, changed the check was written to TDEC. He changed it and put his name in it and cashed the check. Look, nobody does that. That's irresponsible, and it's not what should be representative of the integrity of the engineering profession. And I think that this individual has clearly demonstrated not only incompetence, but also an absolute lack of character and integrity in the way he's exercised his design. And so I'm not recommending permanent suspension, but a 6-month suspension. And I've talked to Stuart about this. I want him to submit the first set of plans that he does after the suspension is lifted. I want it submitted again for review so that we can have at least some knowledge that he's made an attempt to do things correctly.
And for reference point too, you've got your iPads in front of you. It's number 7 on the legal report, and that was the new recommendation. And then while you're getting there, Mr. Jett.
Just reading over the complaint, Alvin, I know you've looked over everything, but does it put us in an appropriate point to look at his progression over 6 months, or is it a better thing to say revoke the license and have him take the PE exam again, get the 5 references, and let the industry gain the credibility? And I don't know the answer to that. You saw the plans.
I did.
Just asking the question.
I did actually think about that, but the other thing, and maybe I'm soft-hearted and soft-headed, but I know that this is this individual's sole source of making a living. I mean, and I'm assuming he's got family, and I'd like to at least, we did issue a letter of caution. He hasn't had his license suspended before. I think if we give him, if this should be a dramatic wake-up call for him.
Go back to the one part of this is incompetency.
Yes,
The other part of this was changing signatures.
changing who the check was written to, not the signature on the check, but who it was written to. It was written to an agency that was supposed to be sent in for a permit. He changed and he deleted the agency's or whited out the agency's name and wrote his name in instead. So the check was going to him.
That's more than incompetence, that's
It's
criminal.
malpractice.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's.
And I've noted that.
Rises to another level. So
Well, and just if I can help a little bit with that one, what we're doing here is sort of the citation on the side of the highway. He has to agree to that. It's agreed citation. He'll have to. We'll send him let's say if you accept the recommendation and we did a 6 month suspension, he would have to agree to that, to the contents, the findings, and his culpability in that regard, and then he would sign that, and then he would be suspended. If he doesn't agree with that, then we take it to a formal hearing, and then everything's on the table then.
Now, let me continue that about the check. In a follow-up, the owner found out what he had done, and after the owner challenged him on it, he explained, to send something into this regulatory agency, now I have to do it by credit card. Well, we send it in all the time. That's not always the truth. But he did pay the amount that he took from the check into the regulatory agency, but not until after the owner.
how did this come to us?
It was from a respondent. I mean, from a complaint. Somebody lodged a complaint against him about the quality of the specification, the plans that he had put together, and the number of different reviews that had gone through.
Contractor, engineer, owner?
Owner.
Okay.
But I'm glad you sort of got a primer, kind of make folks be thinking about that, because when we get to that in the legal report, we'll need to have that discussion with the full board.
So does anybody want to do more or less than what he's recommending?
More. I think.
Go ahead.
That's why I do
it's
want
appropriate for
everybody.
the next hour and a half, and then we discuss it again.
Say it again.
I think it's appropriate for the next hour and a half, and then we're gonna discuss it again.
That sounds good. Yeah, we want to leave a little balance for the architects, because they've got to talk about a realignment.
Do you feel better we're behind you?
I tell you, yes, thank you.
So we don't have to adjourn, we just, because, that way we can flow into the next meeting, since we don't have like a rigid schedule. But if you're comfortable with where we're at right now, then we can yield the floor to our architects and give you a few more minutes, and then reconvene at 10 o'clock. Will that work for everybody?
Everybody good?
All right.
We're good.
Thank you, appreciate that. All right, let's see if Brian Tibbs is online. Brian, that looks like that's you, unless somebody has stolen your identity. Brian, you're on mute right now. All right. Well, we'll get into the discussion, right? And then, Brian, if you can hear us, you're on mute. Try to pipe in where you can, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. So, Chair, would you like to call it to order? Are we ready to go? Brian? Well, Mr. Thompson. All right. We'll take previous chair then.
I would like to call the architectural meeting.
All right. We'll take roll then. Rick Thompson,
Present.
Frank Wagster,
Here.
and Brian Tibbs. I see you, but I don't hear you. So we're going to go ahead and start. We do have quorum for this committee. So let's get into that discussion. Your document for which we'll be referencing is at the very bottom. It'll be identified with architect ARCH in the front of it, the very bottom. It's the draft resolution that NCARB has proposed, and so that'll be the discussion that will be one of the several resolutions that they'll make at that conference that we need to be in discussion about our position. Let me get there myself. Okay. All right. What we're primarily looking at there is about 4 or 5 pages in the map. 6 pages in, yeah, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different regions, A through E. And as you'll see that carved out, the way they have it right now is Tennessee used to be part of Region 3, the Southeast region. Now they have us a part of the Great Lakes region. And it looks like what they've done is looped in Virginia into the southeast, and they've it looks like they've brought in Minnesota to more of a central region. But you know, one of the things that Rick and I discussed, kind of a sidebar, is it looks more like somewhat of a sort of a gerrymandering map more than anything else. If the idea was to maintain geographical similarities, and that was the voice of the constituency in the poll that NCARB took, their association took, then I don't know that we get there with that map. And so so I'll open it with that. Mr. Thompson, is anything you want to add to that? And then Mr. Waxter, if you have anything you want to pile on.
Yes. Initially, when they were dividing up these regions, there were multiple options. And this one that seems to have some consensus within the board, which will be reviewed again in a couple of weeks or however long it is in Savannah. We of course, as Tennessee, we're still located in Region 3. And I don't recall about Texas, if they were actually still in Region 3 or not. And if Texas doesn't take exception to their realignment, then that's their business. But I agree with what you said in regard to a gerrymandering type line. What has happened is they have taken Tennessee out and added Virginia in. And geographically, if you look at the top of the state of the state line, that latitude, I don't know if that's an exact latitude, but it's certainly a reasonable way to divide those states up, where Virginia could still be maintained in C or be in C, and Tennessee could remain in the southern district. Or southern region. I think they've got, what do they call it now?
Region E now?
Southeastern, yeah. So they were suggesting that we be moved into the mid-central region, which is kind of odd, being where we are, a southern state. And so in discussion, we were not opposed to some realignment as a state and a region. However, we seem to have taken exception to this particular realignment. So that's and Frank will be able to speak to that, and Brian on his own accord as well. But I don't think it's an appropriate way to reallocate the states to different regions. And as a board member, I would oppose this, you know, and would make that recommendation to our board to oppose that.
And your recommendation would be to remain in the southeastern region. That would be your recommendation, because they may carve it up different ways, but you're just saying, however you carve it up, keep us in the southeastern region. Correct. Is what you're saying.
And if you go by their numbers, I see what they're trying to do with some degree of parity down here. But that, if you flip those states, I mean, that number doesn't change that much. But it just doesn't make sense, I think, geographically and historically, is that we are cut out of the Region 3 and then moved into another region. And from my perspective, I would oppose that.
Yeah. Frank, is there something you want to add?
No, I agree with what Rick's been saying. I do have kind of a question, maybe you can answer this, but in their breakdowns, they've got 2 lines. One says total MBMs and one says total architect MBMs. which are two different numbers. And if you compare like mid-central regions 3,
Wow.
they've got twice the MBMs as they do architect MBMs. To me, MBM means member, board member.
Right, that's correct.
What are they trying to say there?
Yeah, I don't know. You'd have to crawl into their mind. I was thinking the same thing too. Even as you were stating that, I'm like, what are they necessarily inferring? I don't, know why that extrapolation. I don't know why that would be necessary.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I mean, they may have multiple public board members. They may have other, I don't know the makeup of their boards, obviously. If you drop down to the total architect MBMs, it's a closer range. But that threw me off as well, Frank, when I was looking at those numbers. It's just, I don't get it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and if you, in the south, what they've got the southeastern region, if they take out Virginia and add Tennessee back, those numbers aren't going to change.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think our position is, and this being, the meeting in Savannah is for the regions to get together. So I guess that initially we would express our desire to stay in the group that's Region 3 now.
Right, correct. Yep, I agree. That seems to be where, after hearing from you and then Mr. Thompson as well, and then some limited discussion with Mr. Tibbs, and hopefully he can get online here pretty soon. But the general consensus, at least to be from the architects on our board, is that the desire is to stay in the southeastern region, and that makes sense. I get that because there's a lot of shared similarities within that region, and we lose our influence. Sort of gets broken up if we're taking into a Great Lakes mid-central region sort of conglomeration there.
Rick, how many registered architects are in Tennessee?
There's 4,400 registered architects, and about half of those are in-state. And
yeah.
So we go from 18 to 22, 2,300. The mid-region goes down to 2,000. I don't see.
Yeah.
Mr.
I'm not
Tibbs is
getting
on, looks like.
the rationale for this.
Well, like Frank said, if you still flip them back, it stays, it's fine. But
Yeah, I don't understand it either.
and Virginia has never been in our region, for that matter. Kentucky has always been in another region, which for years I thought that was a little odd. But the lines and how they had drawn these lines. So
Yeah, and if you put,
Can I,
if you're looking at that map and you put Tennessee.
Looks like we have Mr. Tibbs on there too. Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Frank. Frank Waxer was just wrapping up a point, and then Mr. Tibbs will get to you right next. Thank you for joining us too. I'm glad to see you. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Mr. Waxer.
If you're looking at the map and you look at Tennessee, Tennessee's pretty much a hub to all the surrounding states. I mean, we're one of the few states that has that many other states touching our border.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of reasons we ought to be a part of this,
Yeah.
the Southeastern group.
Mr. Tibbs, looks like we're ready for you. What
Yeah.
would you like to add there?
well, so I was at the education conference this past weekend that was in Charlotte. So I was able to kind of start talking through this with some people. There is a lot of apprehension and a lot of people are not sure it's going to pass. Apparently, Texas is also concerned with the way, and everybody was, they knew why we were notched out because, like you guys were saying, I think I caught that it was based on the numbers, but it is just from a regional standpoint, it is odd. So anyway, I just wanted to say there was a lot of people that were still kind of murmuring about it, and right now I think Texas and us are the two that are the least happy, it turns out. So that's all.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Stewart just pointed out in our draft resolution that they have to have 37 votes in favor. I would be surprised if they get that. So we'll see. But because I can't imagine, if Texas is already resisting, and I can't imagine Virginia must feel the same way we do. I haven't talked to Virginia, but I mean, they're getting cut off from the Eastern Seaboard, that doesn't even make sense. So, and then, you got Minnesota. I mean, they could probably go either way, but that was strange from them as well. So it's an odds arrangement, especially when all the constituency within NCARB already said they want to maintain geopolitical sort of affiliation. So, this map doesn't represent that entirely. All right. Well, that sounds good. I don't think we need to necessarily draft anything. We could, but I don't. It may. For it to go through all the approvals, if we do sort of a formal, we could do that. But we do need to memorialize our position as a committee, as architects, here today. So we could certainly do that, and then take that with us and for our vote. And if we can get a letter together in time for that meeting, certainly that would be wonderful. But if not, too, I at least want to make sure that we've memorialized your consensus on the record, so we can take that with us to when we go to the meeting and in our back pocket. So,
really,
I guess in that case,
I guess one more quick thing, and then you can close it out. But Rick and Frank, do you think it's something that I should mention to Kathy, as director of it, or Miguel?
Yeah. I don't think at this point, Brian.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure, because I'd been communicating with Kathy about something else. So sounds good.
Well, once you've made a decision, then you could share that decision with whoever, because this is on the record. It's a public record. We don't necessarily need to, direct formal action outside of our, the decision that we make here today. But that decision, once in the record, can be shared however you see fit after the fact. That's fine. Mr. Tibbs, in your absence, may Mr. Thompson here, may he go ahead and direct the vote? And then, did you anything you want to add as far as comments before that, just for the record while we have you?
No, I will say just that the Educators Conference went really well, and it was a lot of good information. And I was going to talk about IPAL a little bit, but otherwise, no other comments.
And when we get to, if you like it, we've got a few minutes if you want to share anything about your conference or in particular.
Well, I'll just specify specifically about IPAL. There is a lot of, like University of Memphis is really interested in getting that program, for instance. So there has been a lot of interest. There was the conference took a lot of time to go through that process with all of us that were in attendance, which gave a lot more, even more enthusiasm about it. So I think I'm not sure if we'll have a lot of programs, but we may have at least one program that is definitely interested in within our state. So just wanted to let the group know that was something we'll probably be starting to hear more about. Otherwise, we'll just, that was kind of the big thing. We also learned a lot about AI. We had a lot of information on that too, and the accreditation. But for this board, I think the IPAL was kind of the big thing. And
that's great. And thank you for representing us. All of our membership here, you folks are very busy. So to pick up some of these extra items so that we have eyes and ears, and that we have a voice in those rooms, and those rooms is so helpful and so appreciated too. Those are so that way, we feel like we went with you, because you take and you glean all the information and bring that back to us and put that on a silver platter, and we're grateful. So thank you for putting your body in motion there and in our stead. We appreciate that.
No problem. Thanks.
I would like to make one point. Our firm had projects in over 40 states, and we've done projects from California to Maryland, North Dakota, Florida, all over the United States. But I would venture to say, and I don't have the exact number in front of me, but probably 75 or 80% of our work is in this region, our region here, within like a 200-mile radius or more. So our work is primarily regional. We do work nationally, but our firm is a regional firm, and that work is in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Texas, Missouri, in this area. So for us, from Chattanooga, it doesn't make sense because of how we're structured and how we do business.
No.
I mean, we can certainly work with other regions, no problem. We know how to do that. It's like working with other fire marshals. It's tough all the way around on that, but I'm just making that point in terms of supporting geographic locations. So,
I think that's a great point. And I see that with licensure as well. So that squares with the representation that you just described with our license base as well. A lot of those folks are within that region.
Yes.
Unless they're moving here for a one project or two, most of them are from this region. So it just makes, and I suspect that's probably translates with other design professions if we were to dig into that a little bit. So yeah, that makes sense. And if you wanted to get started on a letter, and then, you can bring that to me, I'll edit it, kind of kick it back and forth until we get to a good place and you're comfortable with it, and then let it go through all of its approvals if it's coming from the board. But in essence, what we just need to decide today is just on the record saying, as a committee, we want to stay in the southeastern region. However they draw it up, we think that it's more suited to the interest of our constituency, the folks we serve, the public here at large, that we remain in collaboration with those folks. And if so, said a lot, but say we want to stay in the southeastern region. So if we could just get a motion in that regard and then vote on it, and then the committee once it's decided, we'll put it in the minutes, and that's the end of it.
okay.
Rick and Brian, I'd like to move that our stance be that we want to remain in the southeastern region.
That's good. Very well.
Okay.
Do we have a second?
Frank made the motion. Brian, do you want a second?
Well, Brian won't be able to because he's
I'm sorry.
attending virtually. Sorry, Brian, we're just leaving.
No, I
Here you are,
understand.
odd man out.
I second the motion.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All right. Any opposed? All right. Hearing none, though, that is the position of the architects within our board and the committee. Since you're the last committee, you can adjourn, and then we'll have a few minutes before we start the full board.
This committee meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Brian. We'll come back in about 4 or 5 minutes.
Okay.